Hi folks, welcome to another episode of the All Good Things Star Trek podcast, this Star Trek Discovery Canon Eggs, this time for episode 5 of Star Trek Discovery called Choose Your Pain. We'll have a few canon eggs to talk with you about tonight. Let's get right to them. The first one, they mentioned Benzar, one of the planets they were going to. The Benzites are the alien race that belong to that planet. You remember them, Mordock was with Wesley Crusher on Next Generation Coming of Age, and also Mendon was also on a Next Generation episode, I believe with the Officer Exchange Program with Klingons. Anyway, they were the ones that have the sort of respirator thing that they breathe out of. Anyway, that's the planet that those guys are from. So we have a mention of their home world. Also a mention of the Ophiuchus system. Of course, these are all systems that the Discovery has liberated or rescued due to now that their spore drive is working. The Ophiuchus system. Interesting, we'll see later in the episode, Harry Mudd visited that system twice in TOS and animated series episodes. Mudd's Women, he was bringing some of the slave women there to minors, that sort of thing. And he went back there in Mudd's Passion, which was an animated series episode. So we've heard of that system a couple of times before, especially associated with Harry Mudd. Kind of a continuity goof or something, I'm not really sure what it is. We hear them, the name of the Klingon ship that Captain Lorca and Harry Mudd and Ash Tyler are incarcerated on is a D7 class Klingon battlecruiser. Now we've seen Klingon D7 cruisers all throughout TOS. Every time you saw a Klingon ship in TOS, that was a D7 battlecruiser. It's established in all kinds of canon, semi-canon naming conventions all throughout the history of Star Trek fandom, from the FASA games to the technical manuals and all those kind of things. The continuity error, or at least conflict, that ship is referred to a number of times during the episode as a bird of prey. We know that a Klingon bird of prey is what we saw in Search for Spock, that Commander Krug had. Those smaller ships, they're not anywhere nearly as large as a Klingon D7 battle cruiser that we all know and love so well. In fact, there it is right there. That's a Klingon D7 battle cruiser, now that I remember it. So I'm glad I brought that up. So let's look at it. It's one of my favorite ships, all in its glory. Anyway, they say this is a D7 battle cruiser. It's really not. We see the outside of it a little bit, and it's referred to as a bird of prey. So there's a little bit of a continuity glitch, but it is good to hear about it nonetheless. D7 right there. The big canon egg in this episode is the list of former captains that Lieutenant Saru looks to for guidance in helping him be a better captain. We hear about, of course, Captain Robert April, which is the supposed first captain of the Constitution class Enterprise. He is in an animated episode called The Counterclock Incident. He was before Pike, which we'll get to in a minute. Captain April was mentioned early on, or was considered to be the actual character that was going to be on Star Trek. He was changed to several others along the way, but now it is his first time he's been seen. His name has been seen on screen or mentioned in a live-action Star Trek production. So we can get that out of the way. He is for sure official. We're still assuming he was a captain of the Enterprise, but he was on the animated series, so there he is. And of course, we also have Jonathan Archer mentioned from Enterprise. We know him well. Captain of the NX-01 in the 22nd century. A mention of Christopher Pike, who is at that time period the current captain of the Constitution class Enterprise, with Spock in number 1 and all those folks. We have a mention, of course, of Philip Giorgio from the from Burnham's previous ship, the Shenzhou, and of Commodore. I'm not sure what his rank was at that time, but Matthew Decker. He is the captain Commodore of the Constellation in the TOS episode of the Doomsday Machine. Also the father of Captain Willard Decker from Star Trek The Motion Picture. So Matt Decker does also have a name mentioned because, of course, he is a captain in that time period as well. We'll skip Harry Mudd just for a minute, and we'll come back to him at the very end. We have a mention of an Andorian tonsillectomy, and I only point that out only to say that that's the last time I'm going to mention Andorian as a canon egg. It's been talked about a couple times now, so we know that is an established, reestablished race in the universe. Ash Tyler is the this new character that's on Discovery. He was found on this Klingon ship. He helped Captain Lorca escape. The only thing I mentioned him for is the fact that there was a character on the Cage pilot of Star Trek whose name was Jose Tyler. He was a bridge officer, I believe, and it's possible there may be a tie. We may see him mentioned as, oh yeah, my brother is on the Enterprise, and that may come into time. It may not. It may have nothing to do with that character. But I thought that was interesting that there are two characters named Tyler, two Starfleet officers named Tyler, that are now active in the Star Trek universe at this particular time. We heard the Memphis System mentioned in Klingon space, which is where the ship was heading, and they were, or where it was found, and Discovery discovered it. The Memphis System, MEMPA, I believe it's called, or spelled, was mentioned several times in TNG, Redemption 1 and 2. That's a place where Commander Kern met the commanders that were going to pledge their loyalty to Gowron. There were supply lines that were cut there or battled there all throughout the Klingon Civil War in the Next Generation. And they mentioned the Memphis System is where, in Deep Space Nine, in the episode Apocalypse Rising, O'Brien, who was disguised as a Klingon, met with General Martok, who wasn't actually General Martok, he was a changeling. DS9, what can you do? But anyway, the Memphis System is well established as a planetary system within the Klingon Empire, so that gets a name call there. There's a mention of eugenics experiments. They were worried that that they would be doing eugenics experiments on each other, or to get the spore drive to work. I'm really interested. I'm not really sure why they're determining their eugenics. Eugenics is typically controlled breeding, which is what happened in the eugenics wars. It was special breeding programs that bred super men like Khan, Nooney, and Singh, and the augments and all of those. They were superhumans that were bred through selective breeding and through biological, technological advances. This is not, what they're doing is not really eugenics by the definition, so I'm not sure why they continue to call it that, but that's a callback why they say eugenics, bring that up. A big parallel in this episode to Voyager, the episode with the Equinox, called Equinox. You recall in Voyager, the Equinox was a Starfleet ship that was previously captured by the Caretaker, brought to the Delta Quadrant, and they were forced to actually use the life energies of native creatures of the Delta Quadrant to power their ship in order to create shortcuts to bring them back to the Alpha Quadrant. A similar parallel type of situation with the tardigrade, where the Discovery was using a native creature to power their star drive, their warp drive, whatever, in this case the spore drive, and it hurt and it damaged these creatures, and they had the moral discussion on whether they should be able to use these creatures just for their own purposes and at the same time hurt them. The Equinox crew had that discussion, decided it was that them getting back to the Alpha Quadrant was more important. Janeway had that discussion. They decided that it was not as important. Hilarity ensued, but it was a parallel discussion, and I saw that very clearly in the controversy with the tardigrade, and we see how that ended up. They ended up letting him go. Of course, if they had not found that they could channel the spore drive through their own system with a little inoculation help, who knows if that choice would have been a lot tougher. But as it was very similar. Quickly about the USS Buran, which was Captain Lorca's previous ship during the early stages of the Klingon War. There was a 24th century version of the Buran that was lost at Wolf 359 in Next Generation. So, and the tradition of naming new ships after old ships that have been destroyed or decommissioned. There's another Buran in Next Generation. And interestingly, that ship was named after a Russian, current-day, real-life space shuttle that was created by the Russians in the early 2000s. And that shuttle was, it had some test flights, but never made it out of orbit because it was in a hangar, and the hangar was destroyed by a storm. Some kind of large storm that came through. It destroyed the hangar, it destroyed the shuttle. It was never rebuilt, but that was the name, was the Buran. We saw the famous Captain Kirk two-handed punch, which is when they were battling the Klingons at one point. Supposedly this two-handed punch that Kirk did so often, supposedly it does not work. I know nothing about hand-to-hand combat. I only know what I'm told, but it's a famous combat maneuver. Apparently they teach it at Starfleet Academy. Maybe however they teach it, maybe it works. I don't know, but we saw it again. Finally, before we get to Harry Mudd, the quote that Lieutenant Tilley gives at the end of the episode, "May the sun and moon watch your comings and goings in the endless nights and days that are before you." That is a paraphrase of Psalm 121, verse 8, from the Bible. It has a little bit of change here and there, but the sentiment is the same. And it's also apparently a Jewish prayer. It's called the Shir Hama'alat, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. But it's interesting that either Commander Tilley is religious of some sort, Christian, Jewish, whatever tradition that she is, and she's calling that from her own heritage to sort of commend the tardigrade back into space, or that phrase, that saying has something that evolved into something that they say in Starfleet. It's interesting that's where that came from. All right, Harry Mudd. We all know Harry Mudd. We love him. He came from TOS, from Mudd's Women, first season. He was also in I, Mudd, which was the second season episode with the androids. That's where he mentioned Stella, his wife, who at that time apparently was a big battle axe, and we saw her in I, Mudd in android form. Not a nice woman. It's no wonder that Harry tried to get away, but it's interesting in this first episode where we see Harry Mudd, he's trying to win her by buying her a small moon. I'm only going to assume that there was some money involved from the father. Harry mentions the Starfleet creed of boldly going where no one has gone before. He uses the TNG version, not where no man has gone before, from TOS. Anyway, we know all about Harry Mudd. We know who he is. We'll see him again in a couple of episodes. So really not a whole lot about him. He's very well known throughout Star Trek fandom. The only other one small thing that I noticed, his little bug creature spy that was there in the cell, he called him Stuart, and I can't help but wonder if he was named after Stuart Little, the little mouse. All right, that's it for me. Don't forget, All Good Things Star Trek Podcast, agtpod@gmail.com, agtpod on Facebook and Twitter, and allgoodthings.podbean.com is the website. We'll see you back here next week with episode 6. Take care.